Yeah, this is actually probably an unusual way of going about this, but I use Listenwise often for for learning about another or about another subject or about our next unit that's coming up. And using this as a pre-listening strategy, we talk about this story about the Black Panther as part of a cultural geography unit that we do on Sub-Saharan Africa. And so middle school students, I teach sixth grade, middle school students are all over movies and the Marvel comics. And so my intent for this story is twofold. One, it's really to capture their student interest. Just like those weird news stories, we want to capture their student interest in connecting with the geography of sub-Saharan Africa. And two, we want to talk about why the story resonated with so many in breaking stereotypes. Now, I myself have not seen the movie, but I do know that that is part of the purpose behind the film. So even though students may not recognize what those two purposes are when we first start it, the story is only 2 minutes long. This Black Panther movie story is 2 minutes. And what we do is we set up a listening organizer for them to help them go through and listen to the story. We go through it a few times just to make sure they're getting all the language. And we'll use a very short listening organizer or a graphic organizer to capture their ideas as students are listening. And then we can go back and check for understanding and expound a little bit more on the story. So, for example, one of the questions may even just be a true or false question. We'll ask before Black Panther. So, just so you know, setting it up in the story, they talk about how people who are, or the Black characters were portrayed in comic books before the movie, the story Black Panther was made. So, we ask in there, before Black Panther, Black characters in comic books were portrayed as vampires or devilish. Is that true or false? And in the question actually combines two things that the speaker says in the story. And it summarizes how those Black characters had been represented before the franchise. And then that would then lead to a discussion. Okay, so how were characters or how were heroes previously portrayed? And why is this story different? What took it so long for a Black character to become the hero of a story? So it's a great way to start the discussion. Another listening organizer question we may have is another true and false one. And again, I teach geography and world culture. So the question is, the nation of Wakanda and Black Panther is fiction. Is that true or false? It's very interesting to see how students relate to this because they think it's a real place, but it also brings in that academic language piece again, the word fiction. And if you notice, even in the description that you see on the page, it says it's fictitious. So you're seeing different forms of the same word. And actually, it even talks about fictional in the story. So you're seeing multiple versions of the same word. And it's also a starting point for the discussion of why the name of the country was chosen, where it's supposedly located, which is supposed to be next to Uganda, and how might people who live in that region now feel about having their place fictionalized, and knowing that you're technically from that area. And other stories, so here's the discussion that we can have. What other stories have you read that have settings and places that may have been fictionalized? And so kids think about the Lord of the Rings or even the Star Wars movies for that matter. The main gist of the story is also not really so much about the movie, but it's about how adults were trying to get groups of students to go see it. And so one of the questions in the listening organizer, and by the way, I think I only had 4 questions in the organizer, but this was one of them. It said, why did adults raise money for kids to see the movie? And what did kids say about seeing it? And so this one now looks a little bit more into representation. Some of the answers were that women are seen as the strongest warriors. So it's not necessarily just the Black characters, but now they're Black women seeing as roles of power. That people had the right to stand up for what they believe in, which really relates back to our social justice issues that we're discussing in our own country right now. And that the term third world country is actually really offensive and discriminatory. So only in a 2-minute story, this is activating, first of all, that prior knowledge and possibly even prior bias. And then it helps us to build context for new learning. So that now that they have a little bit of a foundation, now we can dive a little bit deeper in discussing more about the topic and then looking at, some of those global issues.